The worth of a life. What would it take for you to kill a man? Excuse me? I asked, taken off guard. A stranger in an expensive-looking suit sat across from me at the bus stop. What would it take for you to kill a man? He repeated. Why are you asking me this? I asked, increasingly unsettled. He leaned back against the bench casually, as if he was simply asking for the time. Because I want to know, David, he said, his face expressionless. How do you know my name? I asked, a chill running through me. This was getting creepy. Who are you? The stranger leaned forward and looked me in the eye. His stare was cold and unwavering. I know everything about you, David, he said, not offering his own name. I know that you are drowning in student loans, that you had to sell your car, that you live from one meager paycheck to the next. He leaned back and looked away. I want to know what it would take for you to kill a man, he finished. This guy was seriously freaking me out, and I wanted to run or call the police. But I was afraid of what he might do. He was obviously some kind of psychopath. I decided to humor him carefully until the bus came, just in case. Why would I ever kill someone? I asked. Aside from self-defense, I do not see how that could ever be worth it. You have a gun, and someone is kneeling in front of you, he said. What if pulling the trigger would save 1,000,000 lives? Would you do it? A psychopathic philosopher? So the trolley problem? I asked cautiously. Switching the tracks to save 1,000,000 people by sacrificing one? The stranger waved a dismissive hand. You could think about it that way, he said, but it does not necessarily have to be 1,000,000 people. It could be for anything. Power, money, even the cure for cancer. I had never liked the trolley problem. It was always an impossible choice for me. I would not be able to decide, I said, shrugging. Luckily, I will never have to. He leaned forward again. But what if you do? He said. What if I have the power to make it happen? This guy is insane, I thought. You have the power? I asked, exasperated. If so, why not do it yourself? Why would you make a random person kill someone to cure cancer? I cannot do it myself, he replied. I am unable to directly interfere. I can only act when someone, of their own free will and by their own hand, provides me with a soul to do so. I leaned back and crossed my arms. Prove it, I said. Prove that you have the power to do this. Like I said, I am unable to act, he said. However, I can tell you that when you were 10 years old, you found a frog in a secluded field. You named him Jim. You would return weekly to see him, until one day he was no longer there. You had a crush on Jenny in high school, he continued. You still think about her. You want to call her, but keep putting it off. You are planning to visit your brother's grave tomorrow, he said. 2 days ago. A conversation with a co-worker reminded you of him. You were going to buy flowers later today from the florist on 7th Avenue. Is this satisfactory? The stranger asked. I sat there, frozen in shock. I had never told anyone about any of that. Ever. No one knew but me. It was impossible. Undeniable proof was staring me in the face. It took me a moment to find my voice. Okay, I said shakily. So you need me to kill someone? Kill one person to save others. What you kill for is up to you, he said. You can receive anything you wish. The stranger stood up. You have 20 minutes to decide, he said, looking down at me. You will never have this opportunity again. Think carefully. He turned and pointed. In that alley where I am pointing, he said, you will find a man. I turned to look. The alley was right next to the bus stop. You will also find a gun," he continued. "State your desire loudly and clearly before pulling the trigger." He lowered his hand and turned to leave. "Decide what you would kill for," he said. "Decide the worth of a life." The stranger started walking away. "Remember, 20 minutes, he called back. "Will you pull the trigger?" I looked at my watch, then slumped back onto the bench. What should I do? Was there actually a man in that alley? A man who would live or die depending on my decision? What is the worth of a life? Was it more lives? I could save the unsavable, cure the incurable, find the cure for cancer, fix climate change, discover the secret to immortality, a world without suffering. Just one life lost to save countless others. What about money? I could be rich, never work another day in my life, debt erased, no longer struggling, barely surviving, a life of unparalleled luxury for one pull of the trigger. Power? I could rule nations, change the course of history, every law, every war, every scientific pursuit guided by my hand. No one could stop me. My thoughts were racing. What about the person I would kill? Did they have a family? Friends? Were they like me, with their own hopes and dreams? Their entire life gone with one bullet? It would be my fault. It would be my decision. Their blood on my hands forever. 15 minutes had passed. Do the ends justify the means? Should I kill them? Or do the means justify the ends? Should I let them live? I kept staring at the alley. I had never been so stressed in my entire life. I had to decide. I had to decide now. I stood up and started walking toward the alley. There was no choice. The world would be a better place in exchange for one single life, step by step. They would be remembered forever as a hero. Just keep walking. My heart felt like it was tearing itself apart. Get there, pull the trigger, end a life. 10 feet from the alley, my legs gave out. I collapsed to my knees. Tears streamed down my face. I could not breathe. My hands shook uncontrollably. It was too much. "I cannot do it," I whispered. "I cannot do it. I could not kill someone innocent, for a world they would never see. My decision was made. I would not pull the trigger." With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called the police. It was clear to me now. The worth of a life could not be measured. Soon after, the police arrived. They could not find the stranger I had been talking to. They did, however, find someone in the alley, someone holding a gun, waiting for me. Something told me not to leave my apartment. I should have listened. I didn't go to work that day, not because I was sick or for the simple act of playing hooky. No, it was something else. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. My doom sense was tingling. It might sound silly, but let me explain. Growing up, my mother would occasionally have days that she would refuse to leave the house. If asked, she would tell you that something bad was going to happen if she got dressed and walked out the door, even if it was just to get the mail. That was her doom sense, a deep-seated feeling in the pit of her stomach that portended some unseen calamity just beyond the boundary of the walls. As a kid, I would laugh at the ridiculousness of the idea. Mum's off her rocker today. She thinks she's going to die if she touches grass. It was easy to shrug it off because it was just one of many superstitions in a cup that was practically overflowing on the table, staining the carpet with a million little idioms and axioms. Many of them I am sure you are familiar with. Don't step on cracks. Always toss a pinch of salt over your shoulder should a single renegade grain miss the plate and land on the counter. Never pick up a penny that sits tails side up. So many absurd rules, so many rituals to observe. It's a wonder she got anything done at all. But above all else, one rule was to be followed no matter what. When your doom sense starts tingling, you must obey. Like a lot of lessons that can only be learned the hard way, It was funny, until it wasn't. Sometimes I think I'm lucky that I was ever able to laugh again. But I don't like to dwell on that. Life goes on, and it's easy to write of the things that happen to a child as exaggerated or entirely mythologized. When you're 11, everything is big, and the world is always ending. It's hard to distinguish random chance from preordained fate. As an adult, I would tell myself that I didn't believe in such flights of fantasy. The loudest voice in my head was always quick to rationalize. Sometimes, bad things just happen, and there's nothing to blame but happenstance. I think I always knew that was bullshit. I didn't go to work that day, or any day after, because I knew that something terrible was waiting for me. Destiny, fate, fantasy, whatever name makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. I know it for what it was, the truth. My alarm went off at 6:45 a.m. just like it always did, and I got out of bed with the same sleep inertia that rested on my shoulders since the day I turned 30. I didn't know it then, but to be fair, I barely knew my name before the first stream of hot water hit my back as I took my morning shower. No, I got all the way through the grooming process, past a cup of Kroger coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, all the way to the moment my hand touched the doorknob when it hit me. Only hit isn't the right word. Really, it is more akin to having your body filled with ice-cold water. A sharp chill runs down your spine as your stomach clenches and drops, and your feet feel as though they weigh 1,000 pounds each. Were there goosebumps? Maybe it was hard to tell for sure on top of everything else. The world had stopped around me as something in my mind let out a panicked hiss. Don't. I tried to shake the thought and turn the knob anyway. Stop. My stomach dropped a second time and my hand froze in place. Wrong. Something is wrong. Before I knew what I was doing, I had backed down the hallway into my kitchen. The rational voice in my head was already making a fuss. What the fuck are you doing? You're going to be late for work, and for what? A random bout of anxiety? Maybe it was right. Maybe I was just having a moment, but it was one hell of a moment to be sure. I buried that rational voice that screamed of write-ups and lost wages and walked back to the coffee maker. I told myself that another cup of coffee was exactly what I needed, and then I would hit the road. As I pulled the pot from its cradle, I was alarmed to see my hands were shaking. The great knot in my stomach had loosened a bit, but my nerves must have still been a little frayed. I poured another cup, sprinkling the counter with little drops of Java as the pot writhed in my hand. I promised to clean those up when I got home, when I didn't have somewhere to be. Those drops are still there as I write this. After slamming my second cup of coffee, the shakes simmered down into a dull tremble. I looked at the clock on my stove and saw that it read 8:30. I couldn't remember if the clock was 2 minutes fast or 2 minutes slow, but it hardly mattered. With traffic, I was going to be late regardless. The rational voice piped back up just then, striking the tone of a disappointed mother, chastising me for my silliness. What are you waiting for now? Time to get going, idiot. It was right again. I set the cup down and headed back to the door, determined to get to the office for my daily $200. My hand touched the knob and that weight settled back into my body, but I was expecting it this time. Before my body could shut down again, I forced my way through the door and into the hallway of the complex, feeling sweat prickle the back of my neck as the cold air of the AC wafted over me. The heaviness was starting to return to my feet, but I was resolved to keep going. Stop thinking about it and go. I jogged down the hallway to the elevator and jabbed a finger at the button. The chime had been broken for months, but the down arrow flashed its usual faded yellow glow. So far, so good. A moment later, the doors parted in with a rusty groan and a dull thud, revealing the smudged stainless walls and outdated carpet of the elevator. I put one foot over the threshold when another wave of anxiety washed over me. Turn around. Go home now. Don't be stupid. Get in the elevator. Conflicting voices now, fighting for dominance. It felt like a war in my brain, but all I was trying to do was go to work. I wasn't disarming a bomb, or deciding if someone should be pulled off life support. This was stupid. So, against the wishes of my body, I stepped into the elevator and rode it from the 4th floor down to the 1st, and I crossed the lobby with a brisk pace, ignoring the monsoon churning in my gut. When I reached the double glass doors of the complex and peered out into the wider world outside, I saw nothing. Nothing at all. The early morning traffic started and stopped in a steady rhythm, and passers-by continued to pass on by. Birds fluttered down the street, oblivious to the wide-eyed man gawking at them through an inch-thick pane of glass. Everything was completely and utterly normal. I let out a nervous chuckle and wiped my brow with the backside of my hand. Man, I thought, I really worked myself up for nothing. Yeah, I've been saying that the whole time, asshole. Now get moving. Hey man, are you all right? The voice came from behind me, at the front desk. I turned my head a little too quickly to see the desk clerk, Paul, leaning forward with a look of concern set across his brow. I must have walked right by him without noticing when I was forcing my way through the lobby. You've been standing at the door for like 5 minutes, and pardon my cliches, but you look like you've seen a ghost. He wiggled his fingers as he said the word ghost, as if to reinforce the spookiness. I shook my head and let out another chuckle. I liked Paul. For a glorified doorman, he was surprisingly warm and perceptive. I shrugged and shoved my hands in my pocket. Shit, sorry. Just having a weird morning is all. I paused for a second and then added, must have been that second cup of coffee giving me the jitters. Paul let out a hearty ha-ha and leaned back in his chair. Well then, I need whatever you're drinking because I'm on my 3rd cup and it's not doing shit. He produced a paper coffee cup from the desk and shook it lightly. Not much excitement here to keep me awake. Heck, you're the most interesting thing I've seen all morning. We both laughed at that, and it felt good. It was good. We shot the shit for a few more minutes, before I wished him a good shift and turned back to leave. I was feeling a little better after the exchange. The rational voice chided me for stalling, but I took it in stride. With rationality within my grasp once again, I took a shallow breath and pulled against the stainless steel handles of the doors, letting the cold early morning breeze cascade across my face and chill the standing sweat from my absurd little panic attack. My hands were shaking again, and my insides were still at war with each other, but for a second I felt good about my decision. No flights of fantasy, no giving in to those unreasonable fears. I was not my mother, and if I had a say in it, I never would be. I threw Paul one last wave and pushed through. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, hearing the whoosh of air as the door closed behind me, set against a symphony of idling engines sitting impatiently at the red light. From somewhere in the distance, an ambulance siren was echoing off the buildings. I was outside, and now I just had to round the corner to the lot where my Corolla was parked, no doubt covered in a layer of snow. I turned to walk, cursing myself for not remembering to put the wipers up before the snow came. 10 steps down the sidewalk, the siren was much closer, and I could see the lights of the ambulance down the street. I had time to wonder how it was going to get past the gridlock on my street. I paused to watch it approach. The knot in my stomach twisted yet again, and the feeling of cold water spread through my limbs. Doom. A loud screech cut through the air as the ambulance barreled down the south side of the street, heading straight for the standstill traffic. The driver was trying to slam on the brakes to no avail. The salt trucks had not yet been to my neighborhood, and the road was thick with ice and slush. Even with his foot to the floor, the driver could do nothing to stop what was coming. The vehicle meant for saving lives was about to become an instrument for taking them. As I watched, the ambulance closed the distance at what I would guess was 50 miles per hour, gaining yards every time I blinked. I stood there and stared with a dawning horror of what was about to happen. My stomach dropped into my feet. What the fuck are you waiting for? Run! The ambulance swung over the center line and plowed between two sedans at the back of the traffic jam with loud, mechanical crunch, sending both cars careening towards the sidewalk. A red Ford Focus on the opposite side of the street hit the curb hard and flipped on its side, crushing a man against a wall before he even had time to scream. All at once, the weight in my feet let go, and I was sprinting towards the door of my building. The ambulance hit the next set of cars. One of them was halfway into the next lane, and the unstoppable force crushed the driver's side and sent the car spinning into the next car in the line. The screaming had started by then, a cacophony of fear and agony set against the sickening crack of metal on metal. The carnage was quickly catching up to me, and I tried to tell myself that I couldn't hear the faint, wet squelching under each impact. I was lying. I got to the doors and ripped them open, practically diving into the lobby as the ambulance reached the point I would have been standing. Paul was standing at the window, looking out in horror at the situation. He saw me run in and turned to yell something, but I just kept moving. What the fuck is going? He never got a chance to finish that sentence. A man in an SUV was attempting to escape the chaos and had backed halfway onto the sidewalk when the ambulance smashed through his fender, thrusting the SUV into the southern window of my building. The glass shattered instantly, spraying my back with little pieces of shrapnel. As I reached the elevator, the back half of the SUV was now resting where the sitting area normally was, and Paul was wedged somewhere underneath. In a panic, I pushed the call button what must have been 100 times as I looked across the ruined lobby to the hell that was unfolding outside. At the front of the intersection, a dump truck idled away in the left lane. The ambulance, now looking more like a white and red hunk of scrap metal, found its final resting place in the back of that dump truck. The impact boomed like a strike of lightning landed feet away. The elevator doors opened behind me just as I watched the ambulance driver crash through the windshield and break his neck on the steel wall of the truck in front of him. The force of the blow pushed the dump truck into the intersection, where more terrible crunches followed. There is a weird zen that comes with being in shock. In the movies, when something bad happens and someone goes into shock, you don't really get a chance to know what that person is actually feeling. As it turns out, it's almost sort of pleasant. I was in shock when I stepped into the elevator, and the sounds of screaming and glass and metal faded away as the doors slid shut, replaced by the dulcet tones of elevator music. To this day, I can't tell you if the music was coming from the elevator or my own head. I was faintly aware of a stinging sensation in the back of my neck, but beyond that, the lights were on, and nobody was home. The time between getting in the elevator and finding myself curled in a ball on my bed is mostly lost to me. I only came back to earth when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out and answered without looking, the motions just happening automatically. "Hello?" The voice that came out of my mouth felt foreign to me. It was flat and hollow in the way a hypnotized child would speak. "Jason, it's Mark. It's going on 10 o'clock and I don't see you at your desk. Your time card shows that you haven't clocked in either. Are you coming in today? Because if you're not, you really needed to let me know beforehand. Our attendance policy is very clear. Minimum 2 hours notice for any call-off, no exception. I don't want to write you up, but of course it was Mark, Mr. By the Book, always crossing his T's and dotting his I's, quoting the employee handbook like scripture. I never liked the guy, and I liked him even less at this moment. I sort of tuned out while he was talking, missing the last few things he said. I could hear the sound of an approaching helicopter when a thought occurred to me. Did he say 10 o'clock? Has it really been that long? Even the rational voice was incredulous. Mark was still talking, something about points and discipline, when I found a point to interject. There was a terrible accident. Right outside my apartment. I absent-mindedly fumbled for the TV remote and turned the TV on my dresser to the Channel 2 news, and immediately saw an aerial view of my street, complete with all the carnage below. Turn on the news, Mark. Channel 2. Jason, I don't see how this has... I hung up on him mid-sentence and turned my attention to the TV screen, marveling at the level of destruction that I was almost a part of. The aerial view of the scene cut away to a news reporter on the street, who was doing her best to be professional despite the horror show before her, and mostly succeeding. I turned the volume all the way up and walked over to the window that overlooked the street, pulling the curtains open as I listened for the grisly details. First responders are on the scene now, working to free those that are trapped in their cars. Officers at the scene are unsure of the exact number of casualties, but the death toll is estimated to be at least 10, with at least a dozen others with serious injuries. In total, 20 vehicles were involved in this terrible accident, and rescue operations could stretch well into the afternoon. For Channel 2, this is your fault, Jason. I tore myself away from the terrible scene below, and nearly screamed when I heard that. I desperately thumbed at the remote, trying to rewind to see if I heard what I thought I had just heard. I found the button and jumped back 30 seconds, feeling the remote grow sweaty in my hand. In total, 20 vehicles were involved in this terrible accident, and rescue operations could stretch well into the afternoon. For Channel 2, this is Paula Grayson. I didn't realize I had been holding my breath, and I let it all out in a massive exhale. I felt stupid believing the news had talked to me directly. I must have been losing my mind, but who could blame me? I just witnessed the death of God knows how many people, and could have easily died myself if I hadn't moved when I did. This fact, laid out so bare before me, caused my knees to buckle. In the time since, I hadn't really processed what happened, and all at once it crashed over me like a tidal wave. I fell into my bed and started crying. I cried for the man pinned by the red Ford Focus, for the ambulance driver whose last view was the back of the dump truck, for Paul, oh God, Paul, who was always so warm and friendly, now cold and dead beneath an SUV not 3 floors down. All of this destruction, all of this unnecessary death, and all of it could have been avoided if... Your fault. No, that wasn't right. There's no way it could have been my fault, could it? All I did was try to go to work. There's nothing I could have done to cause that. It was the ice, the traffic, the ambulance. There was no way for me to stop it. I was just going to... You should have stayed inside. Bullshit. That's just superstitious bullshit. Even if you stayed inside, all of those people would have died anyway. That may have been true, but... No buts. Do you hear yourself? You're starting to sound just like your mother. My head was at war with itself once again, with the rational voice desperately vying for control. For the rest of the day, I did my best to actively avoid thinking, to varying degrees of success and failure. Try as I might to keep it out of my mind, flashes of the accident would barrage my senses at regular intervals, bringing up a cavalcade of conflicting emotions: grief, anger, fear, and guilt. The guilt was the worst of it, because I could explain it no more than I could accept it, yet it was there all the same. It didn't help that the scene was right outside my windows, and it especially didn't help that I could hear the tow trucks and ambulances and fire engines. By 9, I was exhausted in every sense of the word. I don't think I could have cried any more if I tried. My eyes had become deeply sunk in 2 very red rings. My neck was sore from the tiny bits of glass that I eventually found and removed with tweezers. I checked the news before I went to bed, and the final number had been tabulated. 12 dead, 15 injured, among which were several children. My heart broke all over again as I turned off the TV and settled into blankets and pillows. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow we can start to put this behind us. If only. My alarm began blaring at 6:45 a.m. on the dot, just as it always did, and when I slammed my hand on the snooze buttons, I immediately became aware of 2 things: the tense knot in the pit of my stomach, and a panicked whisper at the edge of my mind. Doom. I snooped on my roommate's computer. I wish I'd found nothing. I know how this sounds, but I swear I had a reason. Every once in a while, when my roommate Connor wasn't home, I'd check his room. I didn't do this to steal anything or be a snoop for the sake of it. No, I wanted to reassure myself that I wasn't living with someone who'd eventually end up on the news. Connor isn't a regular guy. He's a little too proud of his German heritage, if you know what I mean. The kind of pride that sneaks into places where it doesn't belong. Nazi jokes that land wrong. World War II facts nobody asked for. He says them casually, like he's just sharing trivia, but he always watches your face afterward, always checking for judgment. To make matters worse, he's obsessed with guns and knives. He collects them, displays them, lines them up on his wall like achievements. There's a twisted dagger mounted above his television that he once called a real beauty, and I remember wondering why anyone would need something shaped like that, unless they'd spent time imagining what it would feel like to use it. His room puts out bad vibes beyond just the murder weapons. Between morbid heavy metal posters for bands no one has heard of and the 2 movie posters he has up, American Psycho and Joker, by the way, there were lots and lots of old war memorabilia that seems to always happen to be German. No old United States Army helmets or Red Army Ushankas. He only had the stuff his favorites used. That included a World War II gas mask hanging on the wall, stiff and yellowed from prior use. He fucking loved that thing and would wear it at night to freak me out. So yeah, I consider it my civic duty to search his room from time to time. Not because I'm nosy, because when someone surrounds themselves with weapons, Nazi iconography, and incel shit, you start wondering if they're ever going to act out one of their special interests. I sat at his desk and logged into his computer. His password was his favorite movie plus the same numbers he used for everything. The numbers 12, 13 and 14. No idea the meaning behind those, but he uses them for everything. Usernames, gamer tags, passcodes. His overuse of them made guessing his password a lot easier, that's for sure. The browser that opened upon logging in wasn't Chrome. It was a Tor browser. Connor loved talking about the deep web, or the dark web. Always said it with a grin, like he knew something about it, everyone else didn't. At first it almost felt stupid. Drugs, weapons, things so blatant they felt fake. I even laughed at one site offering hired killers like it was an online food menu. It seemed my fears of Connor were unfounded. He was just using the dark web to cosplay being a criminal, None of this shit was real. I was about to get off when I noticed a message pop up on Connor's computer through the open door. A chat app I didn't recognize. The sender name was just a single letter. 10th Curiosity 1. It always does. The messages assumed I was Connor. X joked with him about always working during the matinees. X even mocked him for being sloppy and not using his ghost, whatever the hell that meant. When I replied, pretending to be sick and home from work, the response came almost instantly. They sent a link. They called it a red room. I knew what that was, but I told myself it wasn't real. The FBI says they aren't, so I clicked anyway. The screen went dark, then bright red, like a theater curtain pulling back. The chat exploded with emojis. Popcorn, eyes, smiley faces. It was like a demented Twitch chat. Then the stream started. There was a young woman on screen, tied up and terrified. The first bid was for her to get one of her fingers cut off and fed to her. I laughed at first. I actually fucking laughed, thinking it was all bullshit. But then a man in a hockey mask stepped into frame with a knife not all that dissimilar to the ones Connor had hanging on his wall. The man in the hockey mask cut her finger off like it was a piece of meat at the deli. As she screamed, he shoved it down her throat and she vomited it back out. So he tried to feed it to her again, but this time she kept her mouth shut. So he grabbed her by the nose and squeezed until it started gushing blood. That got her to scream again, and after 3 of the worst minutes of my life, the man in the hockey mask got her to eat the finger. I won't repeat the other bids. I won't repeat what people were asking to be done to her, or how casually they typed it. I just remember realizing, in a cold, quiet moment, that Connor had more points saved up than I'd seen spent so far, and people were spending a lot. I muted the audio and nearly threw up. I ran to my laptop and considered calling the police, but I doubted that would be any good. They'd think I was making this shit up, so instead I tried reporting the site through the FBI's cybercrimes division. When I went back to Connor's room to grab the pertinent site information, a private message popped up. "I wouldn't do that," X said. I tried to ignore it until X added, "Ed, that's my name." I considered what to do next. How could X know it was me and not Connor? How the fuck does he even know who I am? Did Connor tell them about me? "Do what?" I replied, curiosity getting the better of me. "Report the site like you're trying to do right now." "It won't work, Ed." "Why not?" I replied again, taking pictures of the conversation with my phone. "Nice try." "I'm in your phone too," X replied. Not in the chat this time, but through my phone's messenger app. "You still can't stop me," I texted them back, hoping that taunting them would get them to overplay their hand. That's when X replied back with my full name, home address, credit card number, and the names and addresses of my parents and sister. X told me the site would be gone before anyone found it, that I'd sound crazy. Then they said something worse. "You don't want to be in the next show, do you?" They told me to place a bid, not to save her, but to participate and implicate myself too. "All you gotta do is have him cut her." "That's all," X explained. When I put in the bid, my hands were shaking so badly I almost missed the enter key. I didn't even look at the number afterward. I just stared at the screen, waiting for something to stop me. An error, a disconnect, anything. The chat froze, then it exploded. Question marks, laughing faces, people typing things like "what?" and "is this a joke?" Someone accused me of wasting points. Someone else said it was boring. I felt this thin, stupid flicker of hope rise in my chest. Like maybe confusion was enough. Like maybe nonsense could derail this death machine. On the stream, the man in the hockey mask tilted his head. He looked genuinely curious. He set the knife down. I didn't breathe until I saw his hand come back into frame holding an electric razor. The sound was what broke me. That low mechanical buzz cutting through the silence. The girl started crying immediately, like she already knew what was coming. Like humiliation hurt almost as much as everything else. She tried to turn her head away, but she couldn't go anywhere. Hair fell into her lap in uneven clumps. The chat went quiet again, not angry this time, watching. I felt sick, but I also felt something worse. Relief. A coward's relief. I told myself I'd done something, that I'd changed the outcome, that this was better. Then the applause started. Clapping emojis. Fire. People calling it bold. Avant-garde. Someone typed that it was poetic, that stripping her identity was more interesting than hurting her body. I wanted to scream at them that they were all insane, that this wasn't art, that this wasn't even mercy. It was a thin attempt to appease X without it weighing too heavy on my conscience. A private message popped up. Well done. Before I could even process that, another bid appeared, bigger than mine, bigger than anything I'd seen all night. The man in the mask stepped back so the camera could see her clearly. Her ruined hair, her shaking shoulders, her empty, exhausted eyes. He grabbed a machete. I knew what was coming before it happened. I muted the audio, but it didn't help. Her now exposed scalp erupted red as she was cleaved to death with the machete. I think somewhere between the 5th and 6th swing she died. At least I hope she did. When he was done, the man in the hockey mask left the machete in her skull, much to the sick delight of the chat. The stream ended shortly after. I cried until my chest hurt. I prayed that was the end. The horrible, sickening end. It wasn't. X messaged me again. Said I had one more task to complete to prove they could trust me. Said unlike the last one, it would be fun. When I read X's final task, I couldn't help but look up from the computer screen and toward Connor's wall. The gas mask and the knife were both staring back at me. You know what to do, X said. That night, Connor came home like nothing was wrong, headphones on, heavy metal music blasting. He barely looked at me as I watched television in the living room. Later, from my room, I heard him settle in, the familiar clicks of his keyboard, the same browser opening, the hum of his music still blasting in his ears. Another message arrived for him. I saw it reflected faintly off the window as I stood behind his door, ready for the show. It was from 10th. I picked up the knife on the wall behind Connor as he typed his response. Always, Connor replied. When the stream loaded, Connor didn't understand. He saw on the screen his own face, confused. Then, as he came to realize what was going on, afraid. Very, very afraid. A message popped up. Great, because tonight you're the star. X's message caused Connor to rip out his earphones and turn around to see me standing right behind him. I was wearing the gas mask, holding his favorite knife. The one he loved to imply was used on Holocaust victims. I won't lie to you all. X was right. I did have fun. If you ever encounter a long-abandoned mining town without a single speck of decay, please just keep driving. The authorities say my friends must have gone crazy. They claim no right-minded person would end things the way they did, but we were only stranded in the desert for one night, not weeks, not months, not even a full day. 12 measly hours. Who loses their sanity over the course of a single night? There were 4 of us, Haley, Yasmin, Theo, and me. We were an unlikely bunch. Not much overlap in lifestyles, career paths, or political leanings. That said, we all had 3 things in common. We were young. We were healthy. And we all loved visiting abandoned places. Our destination that morning was an abandoned mining town located in the southwest corner of our state. Just a mile from the nearest highway. nestled snugly in the valley between a pair of red rock mountains. There it was. Wasichu. Per usual, Haley led the charge. She flung herself from the passenger seat and began dashing toward a nearby church. Theo was livid. I, on the other hand, couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. There was something comedic about watching a woman clad in a lavender Lululemon bodysuit sprint full tilt into a ghost town. Wavering slightly in the wind, the town almost seemed to shy away from Haley, as if she were an affront to its modest, God-fearing sensibilities. I slung my camera around my neck. With the midday sun beating waves of dry heat against our backs, we hopped out of Theo's Jeep and began exploring. The town wasn't much, but even from a distance, I could tell it was surprisingly pristine. As Yasmin, Theo, and I walked down Wasichu's singular street, a sense of awe embedded itself deep into my gut. The saloon's porch was weathered, sure, but none of it was outright rotten. No holes. No obvious insects chewing through the wood. Not one plank out of place. The schoolhouse windows were caked with dust, but none of them were broken. We could even read the signs denoting which building was which. By my estimation, the paint had to be more than a century old. It was incredible. It would have been even more incredible if Theo and Yasmin had the decency to go somewhere else for a bit and leave me alone. I couldn't focus on taking good pictures. There was Yasmin and her oral fixation with sunflower seeds, audibly shattering the shells between her teeth, sometimes discharging a red-tinged glob of spit into a napkin if one of the shards jabbed her gums and drew blood. When she finished a bag, she always had another. Theo often joked that if we were to get lost, rescuers could just follow the trail of blood, spit, and empty plastic bags to our exact location. Not to say he was any better, just as obnoxious in a different way. The man couldn't shut his mouth, always chattering, always joking, always filling the air with meaningless drivel. When Haley's mom passed, he couldn't even keep quiet for the whole funeral sermon. He had to comment on the shape of her coffin. Not even a quarter of the way through, he leaned over to me, whispering about how the edges were weirdly round, like they were burying her inside a hollowed-out torpedo. Before long, I reached my limit. I told Theo and Yasmin I was going to splinter off on my own for a while. They were disappointed, but that was their business, not mine. I knew I'd jogged far enough ahead once I couldn't hear the incessant chewing or the relentless jabbering anymore. I couldn't hear anything at the end of the street, actually. There isn't a lot of white noise in the desert. A gust of wind singing through a sand dune here. A grasshopper chirping in some bluegrass there. But this was different. The silence was pure, oppressive, all-consuming. I was standing in front of a squat, windowless building. A shed, maybe. I couldn't be sure. It was the only building without signage. I twisted the doorknob. It didn't open. My hand encountered a clunky resistance, like it was locked, but it couldn't have been, because on the second try it gave way. The hinges didn't creak. My boots didn't thump against the floorboards. Everything remained silent. A red-orange flicker met my eyes, pulsing and pushing back against a hungry darkness. Candlelight, I think. That's where my memories end for a while. I didn't pass out or anything. The sensation was gentler, seamless, similar to falling asleep. 1 minute your head is resting on a pillow and you're reflecting on your day, and the next minute you're gone, whisked away. Actually, I do remember one detail. A single sound, loud enough to pierce the silence, and one that I would recognize anywhere. Click, 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 click. The shuttering lens of my camera. My memories resume after nightfall. The veil rises, and I'm staring at a red-orange flicker and an encroaching darkness. At first I thought I was still in the shed, but the scene had changed. The flames were larger, more effervescent, and the darkness was dappled with a bright array of white pinpoints, a campfire below a clear night sky. Theo's voice booms into focus. "Jesus Christ, Haley! Remember what Valentina said when she circled this place on our map?" Yasmin was curled into a ball on the opposite side of the fire, knees tucked against her chest, head buried in her thighs. Theo was on his feet, gesturing wildly at Haley, who was pacing so furiously that she was kicking up small clouds of sand in her wake. "Yes, Theo, of course I do." "Then why did you sprint into town when we got here?" Valentina specifically said, "Look, don't touch." That was the plan. We all agreed. We'll stop, get a few pictures from a distance, and enjoy the scenery. Haley threw her hands in the air. "You really think the land is cursed? That's why your car won't start. You sure it isn't your complete lack of responsibility? Your absolute failure to ever take care of anything?" His pupils fell to the sand. Tears shimmered against the roaring fire. "And remind me, did I put a gun to your head and force you into Wasichu?" My eyes swung back to Haley. She noticed me staring. "I'm sorry. Something you'd like to add?" I shook my head no, then stopped staring at. Those were her last words. Haley's anger vanished. Her arms went limp, her expression turned vacant. Every muscle relaxed except the ones controlling her eyes. Both bulged violently. One eyelid retracted so far it disappeared within her skull. The other hung halfway down. There was a crescent-shaped indent above her lashes from how hard her eye pressed against the lid. There was a pause. Then her body reactivated. She started sprinting, wide, endless circles around us. "Haley, what are you doing?" Yasmin whimpered. No response. She didn't slow down. Minutes passed. Her breathing became harsh. Wheezing bursts spilled from her chest. Her head swelled until it turned a deep, bruised indigo. Theo tried to tackle her. He missed her waist and grabbed her shins. She fell. Her ankle shattered against the sand with a crunch that made me nauseous. She didn't stop. She ran on it anyway, tearing flesh and bone, then vanished into the darkness. The sound faded. Then there was nothing. Later, exhaustion took us. Click, 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 click. I woke up sitting upright. Yasmin was eating the ground. Sand, insects, a rodent, anything. Her stomach expanded until it ruptured. She died where she fell. At dawn, Theo screamed for over an hour until his body gave out. Then the jeep started. I drove home. 8 days later I was cleared, but the pictures remained. A door opening, a black box, a necklace. And then gone. I'm wearing it now. I can feel it pressing into my chest. I can't take it off. All I can do is watch. We got stranded in a snowstorm driving home for Christmas. There was something else hiding in the snow. Darkness swiftly stretched across the snowbound landscape, held only at bay by the spaced-out streetlights flashing by in a low-frequency blink. I sat in the front passenger seat, my eyes glued lazily to the window as I barely held on to my waking thoughts in a mix of monotony and comfortable boredom. In the cup holder sat a long-since cold cup of coffee my dad had bought a few towns over in a foolish attempt at staying alert. We had already been driving for 12 hours, and we would be driving throughout the night until the early morning hours to reach our destination in one go, managing to avoid spending money on a motel. My dad was stubborn like that, only willing to cash out on services he deemed necessary. Comfort was a luxury. Had it still been warm outside, he would have insisted on sleeping in the car, knowing full well that he would wake up with an aching back. Arguing this point to him would, of course, have been a futile task. I turned in my seat, momentarily dozing off. I had always loved the feeling of sleeping in a moving car, only to wake up at an entirely new destination. It held an odd sense of peace and comfort to let my dad take care of the journey, as if nothing bad could happen whenever he was in control. I listened to the whirring sounds of the engine, and the radio faintly playing a segment of the mystery show Unheard, recounting the story of the Baikonur missing cosmonauts of 1993. A mild bump in the road then shook me awake, signaling that we had made it past the city to once again drive across endless country roads through fields and forests. The street lamps that had illuminated the path ahead were gone, leaving us with nothing but our car's high beams to lead the way. The farmers' fields were quickly replaced by dense forests on each side of the road, glistening snow covering each branch, glittering in the dark night. A small, makeshift parking bay appeared a little way up ahead. My dad pulled into it, putting the car in park as he announced that he needed to take a leak, an urge I shared after driving non-stop for the past 7 hours since our last stop. We took a few steps into the woods, forming fresh footprints in the thus far untouched snow, and stood side by side, separated by a tree as we took care of business. A brisk breeze shot through the trees, unsettling snow in the branches above, which subsequently came pummeling down onto my head, slipping in under my jacket as the snow quickly melted against my skin. My dad let out a chuckle, to which I responded with a freshly formed snowball tossed toward his head. A quick but hectic snowball fight ensued, ending with a decisive victory in my favor, though I suspected my dad had let me win. By the time we returned to the car, the skies above had turned overcast with a thick layer of dark clouds. Specks of white appeared before us, signaling that the clouds had already decided to let their first snowflakes fall to the ground. "Storm's coming," my dad stated matter-of-factly, as if he had hidden foresight. "We better get going before it starts." No sooner had we gotten back on the road than the few flakes turned into heavy, direct snowfall. Though the roads had been cleared a couple of days prior, it would not take long for the asphalt to turn into a slippery mess. Still, we kept pushing, knowing better than to let ourselves get snowed in here in the middle of nowhere. The wind picked up, shooting white specks of snow toward our windshield, lowering our visibility to near zero. We slowed down, desperately trying to keep the road in sight. Minutes passed, and the path ahead quickly faded away into a white sheet. We were left with no choice but to slow down to a crawl. Even then we hit the edge of the road, barely able to swerve back onto the slippery asphalt. "We should stop," I begged. "If we stop here, we are not going to be able to get moving again," my dad argued. But it would not matter, because before we could get a chance to argue about our predicament, we came to a gliding halt as the snow ahead had piled up to levels far exceeding what our car could traverse. "Fuck!" my dad yelled out of frustration before quickly catching himself. "Sorry, didn't mean to say that." But the damage had already been done. My dad was a stoic man, never resorting to profanity unless reaching his absolute limit. With a single word, he had let it slip that he was no longer in control, and that fact terrified me more than anything that could have happened on the road. "We should turn around," I suggested, worry clearly present in my voice. "It's no use. The roads are not going to get better in the other direction either. We are in too deep." He pulled his cell phone out of the glove compartment and turned it on in a hopeless effort to call for help. But this far away from the nearest city we were out of luck. There was not a single bar of signal to reach civilization. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "It's going to be all right," he said as reassuringly as he could. "Your grandparents know we are coming. Once they realize we are not there, they will know we are stuck on the road. They will send someone. I am sure of it." "How do you know?" I asked, not demanding an explanation but further reassurance. "Trust me, I have known your grandparents a lot longer than you have. We will be fine as long as we make it through the night. But it is going to be cold, so I am going to need you to get dressed, all right?" His trademark confidence calmed me down a little. After all the stories he had told me about the perils he had endured, surely he would know how to keep us safe. I did as my dad ordered and put on several layers of clothes taken out of my suitcase in the trunk. Though we had little in terms of supplies, there were enough snacks back there to keep us satiated through the night. I dug through the luggage, the presents for my grandparents, and carefully put aside my dad's prized hunting rifle. "Don't worry. If we get stuck here for more than a day, I will go hunt something for us to eat," he joked. "But we are going to be out of here by tomorrow. We just have to stay put until someone comes to get us." We turned the car off, still kept warm by the residual heat that dissipated minute by minute. Even our presence within the car cabin alone kept the heat trapped inside, if only for a short time. I tried to sleep, hoping that the roads would clear up during my slumber, allowing me to wake up in a completely new location as I had first anticipated. My dad, stubborn as he was, stayed awake, intermittently checking his phone in case a signal could get through. Whenever the temperature dropped too low and I so much as shivered, he restarted the engine just long enough to heat up the car, keeping a close eye on the fuel gauge. Despite our troubling predicament, I once again felt safe in his presence, enough so that I managed to fall into a deep sleep full of bizarre dreams about forest giants and snow trolls, triggered by the sounds of howling wind and snow pounding against our car. I awoke again to my dad opening the driver's side door to get outside. He turned to me, shovel in hand. "Stay put. I am just going to clear the exhaust pipe," he explained. The door had only been open for 7 seconds, but it had been enough to drastically drop the temperature inside. He held up a flashlight to assess our situation, its beam prominently displayed by the incessant snowfall, though only able to penetrate it for about 5 feet. He worked slowly, clearing the exhaust pipe of snow to stop us from getting suffocated by carbon monoxide gas. It would not clear the road, and within a couple of hours he would have to clear the way again. He then cleared a narrow path between the growing layer of snow and the passenger door, allowing both of us to quickly get out of the car if needed. Once the job had been done, he got back into the car and started the engine to heat up the interior again. His hands shivered from the cold, and he looked worried, though he would never admit to such. He again ordered me to try to get some rest while he stayed awake to make sure we would not get buried in the snow. Again I fell asleep, though it was an uneasy one as I had started to notice that even my dad might not be equipped to keep us safe overnight. Then the door opened once more. Only an hour had passed, and yet again my dad needed to get out to clear the exhaust pipe, car roof and doors. It took more time then, both due to exhaustion and worsening weather conditions. I kept my eyes and ears peeled, praying silently that someone might come to our rescue. The road ahead, now completely invisible under the snow, remained dark. The howling wind had picked up, and apart from the scraping of my dad's shovel and the thumps of tossed snow, there was nothing else to be heard. Then we heard something. It was faint at first, barely cutting through the storm, but it was definitely a contrast to the monotonous cacophony we had endured so far. I contemplated opening my door to listen more closely, but before I could decide, my dad jumped back into the car and told me to stay quiet. He looked pale as a sheet. It was not just from the cold. There was something else in his eyes, utter terror. What was that? "Quiet," he whispered aggressively. I froze, my eyes fixed on the storm ahead, my heart pounding. "Please, help me," a desperate voice called out through the storm, impossibly loud. It was different from what I had heard before. I knew it had not been a voice. My dad got out again, fear turning into determination. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" he called, waving his flashlight. "Stop it, please," the voice called, closer now. It sounded different again, distorted, impossible to tell if it was male or female. "Where are you?" my dad called. "Help me," the voice repeated, not acknowledging us. "I can't see you." "Follow the light," he said. "Oh God, no!" the voice cried, even closer. Something was wrong. I could feel it deep inside me. Whatever it was had awakened a primal instinct, telling me to run. "Dad, get back in the car," I pleaded. He did not hear me. I stepped outside, calling for him again. In the distance, I could barely see his flashlight. "Help me!" the voice screamed, no longer trying to sound human. "Over here," my dad replied. Then the pleas turned into an ear-shattering scream from something far too tall to be human. The flashlight froze, then began to spin. I took a step forward, but something yanked me back. "Close the door," my dad ordered. I did. He killed the lights. Darkness swallowed us. We waited. Then another scream echoed through the night. "What is it?" I whispered. "I don't know. Stay quiet." The clock read 3 in the morning. We stayed hidden as the temperature dropped. My dad held me close. "It's going to be okay, Matty. I promise." The screams circled us for hours. Finally, desperate, my dad crawled into the trunk, clearing the exhaust again. He loaded the rifle. I started the engine. The scream came instantly. He fired. Something landed on the roof. My dad screamed. I crawled out, grabbed the rifle and fired. The creature turned to me. 10 feet tall, antlers, black eyes, too many teeth. My dad fired again, hitting its eye. We hid under the car. It left. We survived. Barely. My dad lost his leg. Rescue came too late for others. Men in orange took us away. Later, 2 men asked questions. They mentioned a threshold event. I never saw my dad for 2 months. He was never the same. He died last year. I still remember, and I always will.